The frost-kissed dawn of Willow Creek, a quaint town nestled in the heart of rural America, painted the sleepy streets with a silvery glow. Time seemed to linger here, as if reluctant to disturb the rhythm of a place where neighbors knew each other's names and the air carried the scent of pine and freshly baked bread. At the edge of this idyllic tableau stood a modest clapboard house, its white paint peeling like memories fading with the years. Inside lived Eleanor Harper, a 76-year-old widow whose days were woven with the quiet threads of solitude since her beloved husband, Henry, passed away nearly 2 decades ago. Her silver hair framed a face etched with lines of both laughter and loss, her hazel eyes still bright with a kindness that had never dimmed. On this particular morning, Eleanor bundled herself in a worn woolen coat, her breath visible in the crisp air as she set out for her daily walk through the neighborhood. The streets of Willow Creek were lined with ancient oaks, their branches bare against the winter sky, and the crunch of frost beneath her boots was the only sound breaking the stillness. As she rounded a corner near the town's old mill, her gaze fell upon a sight that stopped her in her tracks: a German shepherd, his once majestic frame gaunt and shivering, curled beside a rusted dumpster. His tan-and-black fur was matted with dirt, his ribs starkly visible beneath the grime, and his amber eyes held a quiet plea that pierced Eleanor's heart. "Oh, you poor soul," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling with compassion. She hesitated, her practical side warning her of the risks of approaching a stray, but her heart, a heart that had always led her to help those in need, overruled her caution. Kneeling slowly, she extended a gloved hand, her voice soft as a lullaby. "Come here, brave one. I can't leave you out here to freeze." To her surprise, the dog lifted his head, his ears twitching as if he understood her every word. He rose unsteadily, his movements tentative but trusting, and pressed his cold nose into her palm, a silent agreement that this gentle woman was his lifeline. Eleanor guided the dog back to her home, her steps slow to match his faltering pace. Inside, the warmth of her cozy kitchen enveloped them, the scent of cinnamon from a candle mingling with the faint mustiness of a house too long untouched by new life. She prepared a bath, her hands trembling not from the cold but from the tenderness of caring for another being again. The dog sat obediently as she washed away the dirt, revealing a coat that shimmered with the promise of health. She fed him scraps of chicken and rice, watching as he ate with a hunger that broke her heart, and wrapped him in an old quilt, his weary body finally resting on her living room rug. "I'll call you Ranger," she said softly, the name feeling right for a creature who seemed to carry the weight of a hidden journey. "You're safe now, my brave boy." Days turned into weeks, and Ranger's strength returned, his amber eyes growing brighter with each sunrise. Eleanor noticed his remarkable behaviors, how he responded to commands like "sit" and "stay" without her ever teaching them. How he retrieved her dropped knitting needles with a precision that spoke of training. When a metal spoon clattered to the floor, Ranger picked it up gently in his mouth and placed it back in her hand, his movements deliberate and practiced. "You've been someone's partner, haven't you?" Eleanor mused, stroking his head, her voice filled with wonder. To her, Ranger was a miracle. A companion who filled the hollow spaces of her loneliness with his quiet presence, his head resting on her knee as she read by the fireplace each evening. Unbeknownst to Eleanor, 2 figures watched her home from the shadows of a beat-up sedan parked across the street. Tommy and Ray, petty thieves known in Willow Creek for their small-time crimes, saw Eleanor as an easy mark, a solitary widow in a house that surely held treasures of a bygone era. "She's got no one," Tommy said, his voice low and calculating, his fingers drumming on the steering wheel. "Probably keeps cash or jewelry stashed away." Ray, younger and more impulsive, grinned, his eyes gleaming with greed. "We hit her tonight. In and out, no one'll know." They had no idea that the frail woman they targeted was guarded by a protector whose skills far surpassed their wildest fears. That night, as the moon cast a pale glow over Willow Creek, Eleanor sat in her armchair, a worn copy of Little Women in her lap, the soft crackle of the fire lulling her into a peaceful daze. Ranger lay at her feet, his eyes half closed but his ears alert, a sentinel in the guise of a resting companion. Outside, the silence of the night was broken only by the rustle of leaves as Tommy and Ray crept toward the house. Their makeshift masks pulled tight over their faces. "She's gotta be asleep by now," Tommy whispered, his confidence masking the unease in his gut. Ray nodded, gripping a crowbar. "We grab what we can and bolt." "Easy." The thieves circled to the back of the house, where a low window offered an inviting entry. Tommy pried at the lock with his crowbar, the faint scrape of metal on metal sending a shiver down Ranger's spine. Inside, the dog's ears twitched, his body tensing as he rose silently, moving to the hallway with the stealth of a trained operative. Eleanor remained oblivious, her breaths deep and even in sleep, unaware of the danger creeping closer. Tommy forced the window open, and the two slipped inside, their flashlights casting narrow beams across the dimly lit kitchen. They began rifling through drawers, pulling out anything that glinted: old silverware, a tarnished brooch, a handful of coins from a jar on the counter. "Hurry up," Tommy hissed, stuffing the loot into a bag. "Let's get out of here." But Ranger had already sensed their presence. From a shadowed corner of the living room, his amber eyes glowed with an intensity that belied his calm exterior. A low growl rumbled deep in his chest, a warning that cut through the silence like a blade. Tommy froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "What the hell was that?" Ray whispered, his voice quivering as he turned toward the sound. Ranger stepped into the light, his muscles coiled, his growl growing louder, each note a promise of action. "It's just a damn dog," Tommy said, trying to muster bravado, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. Ray took a step forward, raising his crowbar to scare the dog off, but Ranger was faster. With the speed of a lightning strike, Ranger lunged, his jaws clamping onto Ray's leg with a force that sent the thief crashing to the floor. Ray screamed, flailing as he tried to free himself, but Ranger's grip was unyielding, his training as a protector kicking in with lethal precision. Tommy grabbed a chair, swinging it wildly at Ranger. But the dog dodged with an agility that spoke of years on the force, never releasing his hold on Ray. The commotion jolted Eleanor awake, her book tumbling to the floor as she gasped. "What's happening?" She fumbled for the light switch, her heart pounding as the room flooded with a soft glow, revealing the chaos before her. Two men, one on the floor, the other brandishing a chair, stood in her home. Their faces twisted in fear as Ranger held them at bay. "Thieves!" Eleanor exclaimed, her voice a mix of terror and outrage. Ranger, hearing her voice, released Ray but positioned himself between Eleanor and the intruders. His growl a steady warning as he blocked their path to her. Tommy, realizing their plan had unraveled, grabbed Ray's arm. "We gotta go," he shouted, and the two scrambled back through the window, disappearing into the night, leaving behind their loot and their pride. Eleanor sank into her chair, her hands trembling as she clutched Ranger's collar, pulling him close. "You saved me. My brave boy," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes as she buried her face in his fur. Ranger pressed against her, his warmth a comfort in the aftermath of fear, his amber eyes scanning the room for any lingering threat. The night had tested their bond, but it had also revealed the depth of Ranger's loyalty, a loyalty that would soon lead Eleanor to uncover the remarkable truth about her newfound companion. The morning sun brought a chill to Willow Creek, its light filtering through the curtains to illuminate the disarray of Eleanor's home. Drawers hung open, their contents scattered across the floor. And the back window remained ajar, a stark reminder of the intrusion. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea untouched before her, her gaze fixed on Ranger as he stood sentinel by the window, his ears twitching at every sound. The events of the night had left her shaken, but the dog's unwavering presence anchored her, filling her with a gratitude that words could scarcely express. "You're more than just a stray, aren't you?" Eleanor murmured, her voice soft with wonder. She knew she needed answers, about Ranger, about the men who had invaded her home, about the danger that might still linger. Determined to understand the guardian who had saved her, she decided to take Ranger to the town's veterinarian, Dr. Clara Bennett, hoping for insight into his mysterious past. She clipped a leash to his collar, her hands still trembling slightly, and together they set out, the crisp air a sharp contrast to the warmth of Ranger's fur against her side. Dr. Bennett's office was a small, welcoming space filled with the faint scent of antiseptic and the soft hum of a radio playing country tunes. The vet, a kind woman in her late 40s with a gentle smile, greeted Eleanor warmly, her curiosity piqued by the German shepherd at her side. "He looks strong for a stray," Clara remarked as she began her examination, her hands moving with practiced care over Ranger's frame. As she palpated his neck, her fingers paused, her brow furrowing. "Eleanor, he's got a microchip. Would you like me to scan it? It might tell us where he came from." Eleanor hesitated, a flicker of fear mingling with her curiosity. What if Ranger belonged to someone else? What if she had to give him up? But her need for the truth outweighed her apprehension. "Yes, please," she replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Clara scanned the chip, her eyes widening as the information appeared on her screen. "Eleanor, this isn't just any dog. His name's Ranger, and he was a police K-9, partnered with an officer named Daniel Brooks from the Willow Creek PD. He went missing during a mission a year ago. They thought he was gone for good." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat, her hand instinctively reaching for Ranger's head. "A police dog," she whispered, her admiration for him deepening. Clara nodded, already dialing a number. "I'm calling Officer Brooks. He'll want to know Ranger's alive." Hours later, Daniel Brooks arrived at the vet's office, a tall man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and a weathered face that softened the moment he saw Ranger. "I can't believe it," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he knelt before the dog. Ranger's tail wagged furiously, his body trembling with joy as he pressed his head against Daniel's chest. A reunion that spoke of a bond unbroken by time or hardship. As they sat in the vet's office, Daniel shared Ranger's story with Eleanor. "He was my partner for 5 years," he began, his voice steady but laced with the weight of memory. "We worked special ops, drug busts, search and rescue, you name it. Ranger was the best, fearless but smart. A year ago, we were on a mission tracking a cartel shipment. Our car got ambushed, crashed off the road. I was injured, and when I came to, Ranger was gone. We searched for weeks, but everyone assumed he'd died in the wreck." He paused, his hand resting on Ranger's head. "He must have wandered, survived on his own, until he found you." Eleanor listened, her heart swelling with pride for the dog who had chosen her doorstep as his refuge. "He saved me last night," she said softly, recounting the break-in, her voice trembling with the memory. "Those men, they would have hurt me if not for Ranger." Daniel's expression darkened, his protective instincts flaring. "If they come back, they'll have more than Ranger to deal with," he said firmly. "I'll make sure you're safe, Eleanor. You gave him a second chance, he's yours now. But I'm not letting anything happen to either of you." The days following the break-in were a blend of relief and lingering unease for Eleanor Harper. Her modest home in Willow Creek, once a sanctuary of solitude, now bore the scars of intrusion, shattered glass from a broken window, scuff marks on the hardwood floor, and the faint echo of fear that lingered in her heart. Yet, amidst the remnants of that terrifying night, a new strength blossomed within her, nurtured by the unwavering presence of Ranger, her German shepherd guardian, and the unexpected friendship of Daniel Brooks, the retired police officer who had once been Ranger's partner. Daniel had insisted on staying close, his protective instincts honed by years on the force. That first morning after the break-in, he arrived at Eleanor's home with a toolbox in hand, his gray eyes scanning the property with a vigilance that spoke of his past life. "We need to secure this place," he said, his voice firm but kind. Eleanor watched as he replaced the flimsy window lock with a heavy-duty one, his hand steady and sure, the motions of a man who had spent decades ensuring safety. Ranger followed him from room to room, his amber eyes alert, as if he understood the importance of the task at hand. "You don't have to do all this, Daniel," Eleanor said, her voice soft with gratitude as she poured him a cup of coffee. Daniel smiled, a rare warmth breaking through his stoic demeanor. "Anyone who gave Ranger a home after all he's been through deserves this and more," he replied. "Besides, I'm not taking any chances. Those men might come back." Eleanor nodded, her fingers tightening around her mug. The thought of Tommy and Ray returning sent a shiver down her spine, but with Ranger by her side and Daniel's resolute presence, she felt a flicker of courage she hadn't known she possessed. Together, they fortified the house, reinforcing doors, installing motion sensor lights, and setting up a simple alarm system with bells tied to wires at the entrances. Ranger watched it all, his tail wagging occasionally, a silent partner in their mission. Meanwhile, across town in a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Tommy and Ray nursed their wounded pride and battered bodies. The warehouse, a crumbling relic of the town's industrial past, smelled of rust and damp wood, its shadows hiding their shame. Ray rubbed his ankle, still sore from Ranger's grip. His face twisted in frustration. "It was supposed to be an easy job, an old lady's house," he muttered, his voice laced with bitterness. "How did that dog take us down?" Tommy, his temper flaring, slammed his fist against a rusted table, the sound echoing through the empty space. "I'm not letting this go," he growled. "We go back, but this time we bring backup. That dog won't stand a chance." The two thieves spent the day plotting, recruiting two more accomplices, hardened men with a penchant for violence and a disregard for consequences. They called themselves the Crew, a loose band of criminals who thrived on the desperation that had seeped into Willow Creek's underbelly. Tommy's plan was simple but ruthless: return that night, eliminate the dog, and take whatever they could from Eleanor's home. They armed themselves with knives and a stolen pistol, their resolve fueled by a toxic mix of anger and greed. They had no idea that they were walking into a trap set by a former police officer and a K-9 whose instincts were sharper than their blades. Back at Eleanor's home, the evening descended with a heavy silence, the kind that seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Eleanor sat in her armchair, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands, her eyes darting to the windows as shadows lengthened outside. Daniel had stayed, his presence a steady comfort, his gun holstered at his side as he sat by the front door, his gaze fixed on the street beyond. Ranger patrolled the hallway, his movements silent but purposeful, his ears twitching at the faintest sounds. "Jack, isn't this a bit much for an old lady like me?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling slightly as she watched him adjust a camera feed on his phone. Daniel turned to her, his expression softening. "Eleanor, it's not just about you," he said gently. "Ranger's a threat to them now. They might want to take him out, and I'm not letting that happen." He had set up a network of makeshift defenses, wires tied to bells at the entrances, cameras positioned to catch any movement, and a plan to alert the authorities at the first sign of trouble. Eleanor nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude for the man who had become her protector and friend, and for the dog who had brought him into her life. "It feels like something out of a movie," she said with a small smile, trying to ease the tension. Daniel chuckled, the sound a rare break in his vigilance. "Sometimes the quietest lives become the biggest battlegrounds," he replied. "That's where the unexpected strikes." Outside, the moon hung low in the sky, its pale light casting long shadows across Eleanor's yard. Tommy led his crew, their movements stealthy as they approached the house. Their makeshift masks pulled tight over their faces. "We hit the back window again," Tommy whispered, his voice low but edged with determination. "Two of you take the front door, keep the old lady busy while we deal with the dog." Ray, still limping from their last encounter, hesitated, his eyes darting nervously to the house. "This is crazy, Tommy," he muttered. "That dog nearly tore me apart last time." Tommy's glare silenced him. "We're ready this time," he snapped. "We end this tonight." But Ranger was already one step ahead. Inside, his ears twitched at the faint sound of footsteps on the grass. His body tensing as he moved to the kitchen, where the back window offered a clear view of the intruders. A soft clink echoed through the house as Tommy's crowbar triggered one of Daniel's wire traps. The bell ringing like a warning chime. Ranger growled, a low, menacing sound that sent a chill through the air, and darted toward the noise, his training kicking in with deadly precision. Daniel was on his feet in an instant, his hand on his holster as he whispered to Eleanor, "Stay here. They're back." Eleanor's heart raced, her hands clutching the arms of her chair as she watched Daniel and Ranger move as a unit. Their bond forged in the crucible of danger. Daniel positioned himself near the kitchen, his gun drawn but held low, his eyes locked on the window as it creaked open. Tommy jumped inside. A flashlight in one hand, a knife in the other, his face twisted in a cynical grin. "You're not gonna shoot me," he sneered, his voice dripping with false bravado. "This is just a warning to scare me." But before Daniel could respond, Ranger struck, his powerful body launching forward with the force of a coiled spring. Ranger's jaws clamped onto Tommy's arm, the knife clattering to the floor as the thief screamed. His flashlight casting wild beams across the room. At the same time, the front door shuddered under the force of the other two accomplices, who had managed to break through the reinforced lock. They burst into the house, their eyes wide with greed, but Ranger was already there, his movements a blur as he turned to face the new threat. With a precise lunge, he knocked one of the men to the ground. His growl echoing through the house as he pinned him down, his training as a police K-9 evident in every calculated move. Chaos erupted as the intruders scrambled to regain control. Ray, frozen in fear, tripped over a chair, crashing to the floor with a loud thud, while the third thief tried to flank Ranger, a knife gleaming in his hand. But Daniel was ready. His gun trained on the man as he barked, "Get out now, I won't say it again." The thief hesitated, his eyes darting between Daniel's steady aim and Ranger's menacing presence. And then bolted for the back window, his courage crumbling under the weight of their combined force. Tommy, still grappling with Ranger's grip, shouted in desperation, "Let me go. We don't want trouble." Eleanor, watching from the hallway, felt a surge of courage she hadn't known she possessed. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "You broke into my home," she said, her tone firm and resolute. "You threatened my life. You don't get to walk away from this." Daniel glanced at her, a flicker of pride in his eyes as he nodded. "Call the police." "Eleanor," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "It's over." As the sound of sirens drew nearer, Tommy and his crew realized their fate was sealed. Ranger stood guard, his amber eyes locked on the intruders, ensuring they had no chance to escape. The police arrived, led by Sergeant Carter, a grizzled officer who recognized Daniel immediately. "Brooks, what the hell's going on here?" he asked, his tone a mix of surprise and respect. Daniel explained the situation, his voice steady as he recounted the break-in and Ranger's heroic defense. The officers handcuffed the thieves, dragging them to the patrol cars as the neighbors gathered outside, their murmurs of awe and admiration filling the night air. Eleanor sat in her armchair, her hands trembling as the adrenaline faded, replaced by a profound sense of relief. Ranger lay at her feet, his head resting on her knee, his presence a balm to her frayed nerves. Daniel sat beside her, his expression softening as he looked at the dog who had once been his partner. "You were incredible, Eleanor," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "You stayed calm and let Ranger do what he does best." Eleanor smiled, her eyes glistening with tears as she stroked Ranger's head. "I never thought I'd be so grateful for a lost dog on my porch," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "He saved me, and you did too, Daniel." The days that followed brought a newfound peace to Eleanor's life. With the thieves behind bars, her home became a sanctuary once more, its walls now fortified with stronger locks and the love of a community that had rallied around her. Daniel became a regular visitor. His visits a comforting routine of companionship and support. He brought groceries, helped with repairs, and even gifted Ranger a new ID tag with Eleanor's name and address engraved on it. "He's officially yours now," Daniel said, handing her the tag with a smile. Eleanor's heart swelled with gratitude. "I feel like he always has been," she replied, her voice soft with affection. Ranger, too, seemed to settle into his new life, his instinct still sharp but his demeanor more relaxed. He explored the yard with a playful energy, chasing squirrels and rolling in the grass. But at the slightest unfamiliar sound, he would snap to attention, his protective nature never far from the surface. Eleanor watched him with pride, her heart full of love for the dog who had not only saved her life but given her a new one. The story of Ranger's heroism spread through Willow Creek, turning him into a local legend. Neighbors stopped by to meet him, children brought him treats, and Eleanor, once a reclusive widow, found herself at the heart of a community that embraced her with open arms. As spring approached, Eleanor began to embrace small changes in her life, inspired by the courage Ranger had awakened in her. She joined a local gardening club, her hands finding joy in the soil as she planted flowers in her yard, and accepted invitations to community events, her laughter mingling with that of her neighbors. Daniel, too, found himself re-evaluating his future, the events with Ranger and Eleanor reigniting his passion for service. "Taking care of you and Ranger reminded me how much I loved protecting people," he confessed one afternoon, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Eleanor smiled, her hazel eyes warm with understanding. "You're a protector, Daniel, not just for me, but for everyone." On a warm afternoon, Daniel arrived with a special gift, a wooden plaque carved with the words, "Home of Ranger, our hero." He handed it to Eleanor, his eyes crinkling with a smile. "I think this sums up what this place means now," he said. Eleanor's tears fell freely as she hugged him, the plaque a symbol of the new life she had found. She placed it at the entrance of her home, where all who passed could see it, a testament to the dog who had brought light to her darkness. As she sat on her porch that evening, Ranger by her side, Eleanor looked out at the horizon. The setting sun casting a golden glow over Willow Creek. "You didn't just save my life, Ranger," she whispered, her hand resting on his head. "You gave me a family." Ranger lifted his head, his amber eyes meeting hers, and in that moment, they both knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. 1. Compassion can change lives. Lesson: Eleanor Harper's decision to take in Ranger, a shivering stray on the brink of collapse, reflects the transformative power of compassion. Despite her own loneliness and limited means, she opened her heart and home to a creature in need, unaware that her act of kindness would not only save Ranger but also herself. Ranger, in turn, repaid her compassion with unwavering loyalty, protecting her from danger and bringing new connections into her life. Message for American viewers: in a world that can feel cold, a single act of compassion can create a ripple effect of love and safety. Like Eleanor, never underestimate the power of a kind gesture, it might just save a life. Or even your own. Let's keep the spirit of giving alive, because every small act of love counts. 2. Loyalty is a universal language. Lesson: Ranger's loyalty to Eleanor, despite his past as a police K-9. Shows that true devotion transcends time, hardship, and circumstance. Even after surviving a year of wandering, Ranger instinctively protected Eleanor, proving that the bonds of loyalty, whether between humans or animals, endure through adversity. His reunion with Daniel Brooks further underscores this, as Ranger's joy at seeing his former partner reveals a loyalty that never faded. Message for American viewers: loyalty speaks louder than words. A language we all understand, whether it's the wag of a dog's tail or the steadfast support of a friend. Ranger reminds us that loyalty is a sacred bond, one we should honor in our pets, our families, and our communities. In America, where we value those who stand by us, let's celebrate and nurture these unbreakable ties. 3. Courage comes from love. Lesson: Ranger's bravery in confronting the thieves, and Eleanor's newfound strength to stand firm in the face of danger, were both fueled by love. Ranger's protective instincts were driven by his bond with Eleanor, while Eleanor found the courage to confront the intruders because of her love for Ranger and her determination to protect their shared home. Daniel's protective actions, too, stemmed from his love for Ranger and his commitment to Eleanor's safety. Message for American viewers: love gives us the courage to face our fears, to stand up when it matters most. Like Ranger and Eleanor, we find strength in the ones we care about, our pets, our friends, our neighbors. In the heart of every American is the bravery to protect what we love. So let's hold tight to those bonds and let them guide us through the storms. 4. Community heals and uplifts. Lesson: the story illustrates the power of community in healing and rebuilding lives. Eleanor, once a reclusive widow, found herself embraced by her neighbors after Ranger's heroism became known. Daniel's support, the neighbors' kindness, and even the small act of placing a home of Ranger, our hero, plaque at her door transformed Eleanor's isolation into a sense of belonging. This collective support gave her a renewed purpose and joy in her twilight years. Message for American viewers: America is built on the strength of community, neighbors helping neighbors, strangers becoming friends. Eleanor's story shows that no one has to face life's challenges alone. Let's reach out, lend a hand, and celebrate the heroes among us, like Ranger, who remind us that together, we can heal and rise stronger. Community is our greatest treasure. 5. Heroes come in all forms. Lesson: Ranger, a former police K-9 turned stray, proved that heroes aren't defined by their titles or circumstances but by their actions. His protective instincts saved Eleanor from harm, while Daniel, a retired officer, became a hero by ensuring her safety. Even Eleanor herself emerged as a hero, finding the strength to confront danger and rebuild her life with Ranger by her side. The story celebrates the quiet heroism that exists in everyday acts of love and courage. Message for American viewers: heroes aren't always the ones in the spotlight, they're the dogs who protect us, the neighbors who step up, the quiet souls who find courage in crisis. Ranger, Daniel, and Eleanor remind us that heroism lives in all of us, waiting to shine. In America, where we honor our heroes, let's recognize the unsung ones in our lives and strive to be heroes in our own way. 6. Redemption and second chances are always possible. Lesson: Ranger's journey from a presumed dead police K-9 to a beloved protector in Eleanor's home, and Eleanor's transformation from a lonely widow to a vibrant member of her community, highlight the power of second chances. Daniel, too, found a renewed sense of purpose through his role in protecting Eleanor and Ranger, rekindling his passion for service. Their story is a testament to the idea that no matter the past, there's always a chance to start anew. Message for American viewers: the American dream is built on second chances, starting over, finding new purpose, rebuilding after loss. Ranger and Eleanor show us that it's never too late to find redemption, to heal, to love again. Whether you're a stray dog or a lonely soul, there's hope for a brighter tomorrow. Let's embrace second chances, for ourselves and others, and keep believing in new beginnings. Have you ever been touched by the loyalty of a pet like Ranger, or found a second chance through an unexpected friendship? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear how love and courage have shaped your life. If this story warmed your heart, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to join our community of story lovers. Let's celebrate the heroes in our lives, big and small, and keep spreading hope together.